The following is a presentation of Pro Wrestling Focus, a Springer Podcast Network production.
What's good, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to Pro Wrestling Focus, and I'm here today to give you my review of WWE SummerSlam 2026, Night 1 and Night 2. We're going to be talking about it all together here, and we had two big returns from SummerSlam. We had the Viper, Randy Orton, coming back, and we also had Kevin Owens returning to the WWE after being out for 17 months with a neck injury. And we had some title changes also that I didn't expect to happen, as Baron Corbin is the new United States champion. He defeated Trick Williams. And we have a new interim women's champion in Chelsea Green. And how did the two epic title matches pan out between Cody Rhodes and CM Punk and Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins? And who came out on top between the Ruler and the Beast as Obafemi battled Brock Lesnar inside Hell in a Cell? All that and more on Pro Wrestling Focus. All right, so let's open it up talking about the Women's World Championship match. Liv Morgan defending the Women's World title against Iyo Sky. We had Raquel Rodriguez and Roxanne Perez get involved here to help Liv Morgan, and but Iyo was able to turn the tables on Raquel and Roxanne, but in the end, Liv Morgan was able to defeat Iyo Sky and retain the Women's World title. As far as what people thought about this match, people felt like it was one of Liv Morgan's best matches that she's had. And I agree. I thought it was a pretty good match. And a lot of people were not happy with the interference, Raquel and Roxanne getting involved. And people feel like, Iyo Sky should have won this match. Here's what I think. Yes, I do think it was a pretty good match. And I feel like it was one of Liv's stronger matches that she's had in her career. And it goes to show, when you're in the ring with a great worker in Iyo Sky, you can she's one of those people that can carry a lesser talented wrestler to a great match. And I'm not saying Liv's not talented, but Iyo Sky, she's one of the best in the world by far. And I agree with what people are saying, that about the outside interference, because it kind of just gives the audience, basically they're telling the fans that Liv Morgan cannot win on her own, that she needs help from the Judgment Day in order to win, whether it's Raquel, Roxanne, JD McDonough, Dominic Mysterio. Liv Morgan needs help to win. And to be honest, I think Liv has been a weak champion ever since she won the title at WrestleMania from Stephanie Vaquer. I think Liv has been booked pretty weak. Not gonna lie, she has. But I at the same time, I feel like this match here helped Liv more than it hurt her. Because like I said, it was a strong opening match. I think both women brought their A game here, and Liv, she retained. That's what I predicted, that Liv Morgan would retain here. And I can understand people's frustration. Since Iyo was Queen of the Ring and, you know, deserving more, because she didn't get a match at WrestleMania. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I definitely think that, Iyo was deserving here. But at the same time, Liv Morgan, she has to start, improving this title reign, because if she doesn't, then people are just going to view this title reign as a waste of time, and some people already think it was a waste of time putting the title on her. So yeah, they got to start something with Liv, and I think they did that here at SummerSlam with her getting the win over Iyo. Like I said, I think they're waiting on Stephanie Vicaire to come back, so they can reignite the feud between her and Liv. I'm not sure when Stephanie will return, but I think probably here soon we might see her pop up. But yeah, like I said, pretty good match. I feel like these two ladies put in a good performance, and yeah, I think it was a pretty strong opening match for SummerSlam night one. All right, up next, we had the 6-man tag match. We had LA Knight, Solo Sikoa, and Royce Keys defeat the Bloodline, consisting of the Usos and Jacob Fatu. And LA Knight scored the pinfall victory here on Jey Uso after hitting the BFT. A lot of people really liked Solo Sikoa here. Solo was hilarious. Doing the whole run it back thing that Jey Uso does, and he hijacked, the whole thing, and I thought that was hilarious. I thought it was a decent match. Nothing too crazy, nothing to really go awe about, really. But, it was entertaining. And, and like I said, Solo doing the yeet thing. That was pretty hilarious. But I am genuinely surprised that LA Knight, Solo, and Royce got the win here over the Bloodline, because I really thought the Bloodline would win this match. But no, it did not happen. LA Knight picks up a big win here on one of the biggest shows of the year, pinning Jey Uso. And yeah, and then Solo and LA Knight had they had a hug. They hugged it out, which was surprising to see. And yeah, it seems like Solo is gonna be a babyface here from now on, like a genuine babyface. There isn't gonna be no oh, I'm gonna act like a good guy and then turn on you to go back to the family. No, I think he's gonna be a babyface here for at least the foreseeable future. But yeah, it was a fun little match and with a surprise ending. So yeah, can't complain about that. All right, up next we have the Ring General Gunther versus Nick Aldis. And this was Nick Aldis's highly anticipated in-ring debut here in WWE, and I think he did a great job, honestly. For a guy who has not wrestled a match in 3 years, coming in and going up against one of the best that WWE has in Gunther, I think he did a great job, honestly. I think these two had a solid match. Excellent storytelling here. And, they had Mickie James, who was Nick Aldis's wife, and they had their son there as well, Donovan. They were there at ringside, and Gunther, being the great heel that he is, he was taunting Mickie. And that's a part of being a great heel, when you're willing to do dickish things like that, taunting family members, like, oh, I'm gonna beat the shit out of your husband or wife or brother or son, whatever the case may be. Part of being a great heel is doing those kinds of things. And Gunther did that here. It added to the match. And, despite Nick's best effort, he tapped out to the sleeper hold, giving Gunther the victory. And Gunther left the ring, satisfied with his victory. And then Nick was in the ring with Mickey and Donovan after the match. And, that was a good, wholesome moment. The crowd chanting, "You still got it." It was great to see. So even though I predicted Nick was going to win, I'm still happy with what happened. I think, Nick got to showcase what he could do in a WWE ring, and who knows, there might be another chance for Nick to wrestle here in the future for WWE. But yeah, so Nick has lost, but then after the show, or it was on YouTube, I seen where he had a backstage moment with Triple H, and Triple H told Nick, like, "Oh, I appreciate what you did out there. I'm proud of you. Not only are you a man of your word, you're a man. You handled it like a grown man should." And Gunther crossed the line, but you also crossed the line. But you guys settled it in the WWE ring, and hats off to you, Nick. And then Nick said, "Oh, I appreciate that, but I wanted to give you this," and it was a letter of resignation. And Triple H ripped it up, saying, "Nope, I don't accept this, and I am going to reinstate you as the SmackDown general manager." So, yeah, Nick is going to go back to his on-screen GM role on SmackDown, but I think we could see another Nick Aldis match in the future. All right, up next, we have Fatal Influence against Paige and the Bella Twins. And Fatal Influence, they came out with the victory here, and what I thought was a decent match. It wasn't spectacular or anything like that, but it was decent. JC Jane scored the pinfall for her team, and she pinned Paige. But the real story here is what happened after the match, and that was the heel turn. Yeah, Nikki Bella and Brie Bella turning on Paige here. And I mean, like I said, I kind of had a feeling that this was gonna happen at some point. And this was before that Brie and Paige lost the tag team titles. I figured that Nikki would come back and say, "Paige, I appreciate you holding it down for me while I was injured, but now I will take my half of the tag team titles." And then that would lead to the heel turn and all that. But, because now Fallon Henley and Laney Reed have the belts. So, yeah, so now Nikki, it seems like it's coming out of a place of jealousy, the heel turn. Because the way Nikki's been talking, she was on WWE radio, and, it's like, "Oh, how dare Paige try to take my place?" And she's seen how close that Paige and Brie were becoming while she was out, and that was the reason for her heel turn. So, but the other story coming out of this was Brie Bella's injury. Yeah, Brie Bella got injured in the match. She has a broken scapula, and we don't know how long she's going to be out for. So instead of Paige feuding with Brie and Nikki, it looks like we might just have a singles feud between Paige and Nikki Bella, which I'm okay with. Two veterans going at it here. Nikki's she's better as a heel, and Paige, she can be a great heel herself, but Paige really needs to be in her babyface stage right now. Being in the back with the company for several months now. So yeah, I'm interested to see what happens here going forward. All right, up next for the WWE Championship, we have CM Punk defending against Cody Rhodes. And I thought this was a great match. Had great storytelling here. Both men were working each other's body parts, which that's old school right there. That's old school wrestling at its finest. You know, CM Punk was working on the shoulder of Cody Rhodes, trying to wear him down, and then Cody was going after the knee of CM Punk. And yeah, man, these two had a great match. I think this was the best match of night one by far. And yes, yeah, they had an over 25-minute match, I believe. And yeah, I think these two had a great match. And we had a surprise return from none other than the Viper, Randy Orton. Yes, Randy Orton returned. We had a referee bump in the match, and Punk, you know, he took a crossroads from Cody, and he slid out of the ring onto the floor, and then that's when Randy Orton struck. He hopped the barricade, he slid into the ring, hit Cody with an RKO, and then the ref would recover, and then that would lead to CM Punk getting the victory. So CM Punk is still the WWE champion, and Cody Rhodes is the loser in this match. But, you know, I like this finish because it protects Cody. You know, Cody loses due to Randy screwing him over, and then this continues the Randy and Cody feud that got grounded to a halt at WrestleMania. And hopefully now we can get a true blue Randy Orton versus Cody Rhodes feud going forward. You know, no shenanigans with Pat McAfee and Jelly Roll, just Orton and Cody. That's it. Nobody else. And then this will now lead to Punk transitioning away from Cody, and you know, he'll be going against the new number one contender, which I'll be talking about when I get to night 2. But yes, great match, great storytelling. Punk gets the win. All right, up next, the main event of night 1, Obafemi the Ruler against the Beast, Brock Lesnar. Now, going into this match, you know, as last week on my prediction show, I predicted that WWE was going to pretty much ground Oba's momentum to a halt and give Brock Lesnar the win. I am so happy to be wrong. But the match, though, kind of a disappointment. I'm not going to lie. You know, whenever you have a Hell in a Cell match, you want to use the cell. You know, Hell in a Cell is supposed to be chaotic, dangerous. You know, it's supposed to be a brutal match to cap off a feud. And while there was some, you know, moments in there that was like, oh wow, you know, it was just short and not what I was expecting. But at the same time, the aim of this match was to be a passing of the torch moment from Brock Lesnar to Obafemi. As far as the tombstone pile driver spot on the wooden boards, that was, wow. You know, was not expecting that. You know, Brock Lesnar paying homage to someone who has been a big piece of his career, that being The Undertaker, and him hitting the tombstone on Oba onto those wooden boards. Yeah, that was crazy. But at the same time, Oba kicked out, but just like, what the hell, you know? And then he acted like that didn't really affect him. Yeah, there were problems with this match for sure. The cell wasn't used at all. I mean, the Lesnar tombstoning Oba onto the boards, that was pretty sick, but it also was undone in just a few seconds with Oba kicking out and pretty much no selling it. I mean, if I could have redone that, I would have had Oba like just barely kick out of the tombstone, just like a last second gasp, of him kicking out. And then Brock would be like, what the hell? And then Oba's just slow to get up. He's slow to regain his footing. But then he gets like a jolt of adrenaline. And then, he ends up, beating Lesnar after that. But no. But basically, this all in all was just Lesnar in front of his hometown crowd. And doing the passing of the torch. Because after the match, Brock Lesnar got back in the ring. He hugged Oba, and then he got on the mic, and he declared that Oba is the future of the WWE. That he's the past, and Oba is the future. So, the aim of the match was simply that. It was a passing of the torch, and Obafemi will now move on to probably bigger and better things. And like I said, I think that match with Roman Reigns is on the horizon. All right, now let's move on to night 2. And we'll start with the opener. What was supposed to be a one-on-one match between Finn Balor and Sami Zayn changed to a fatal 4-way. Yes, the newly reinstated SmackDown GM, Nick Aldis, comes out, and he added Gunther to the match, which that was shocking. Like you guys just faced off last night, two bitter rivals, and now Nick is putting Gunther in the match. But he wasn't the only person that got added to the match, as Nick Aldis also added a returning Kevin Owens. Yes, KO is back in WWE after being out for 17 months with a career-altering neck injury that could have possibly retired Kevin Owens. But yes, Kevin Owens made his shocking return at SummerSlam, and man, people were bawling in the crowd. They're just overwhelmed with joy that Kevin Owens had returned. And it just goes to show how people have connected with this guy over the years. And for me, being a Kevin Owens fan, yes, this was awesome to see him come back. And he looked good, and he definitely didn't play it safe. He was going balls to the wall right away. He looked overjoyed to be in that ring, and he picked up the victory. He hit everybody with a stunner, including his best friend Sami Zayn, and he pinned Sami Zayn to get the win. So yes, great match, great opening match for night 2, and now Kevin Owens is the number 1 contender for the WWE Championship, so there will be a match between him and CM Punk at some point. And yes, this is just awesome. But I do think, though, that this is just going to be a pivot point to Kevin working with Sami once again. They'll reignite their feud, because I think when Kevin Owens does face CM Punk, whenever that's going to be, whether that's going to be on SmackDown or United Champions, I cannot see them waiting till Money in the Bank to do this match, but they could. I do believe Sami will end up screwing Kevin Owens over at some point. I think when that match happens, Sami's going to do a run in, cost Kevin the match. or they might, make it a triple threat match between Punk, Owens, and Zayn, because Punk and Sami Zayn have unfinished business. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But the main thing here is that Kevin Owens is back in WWE. All right, up next, we have the United States Championship match. Baron Corbin challenging Trick Williams. And I'm surprised here that Corbin got the win. I am surprised that Corbin beat Trick Williams to become the new United States champion. Yeah, and Corbin, yeah, he looked good here. And yeah, I'm surprised that they put the belt on him, this quickly after returning. But yes, so yeah, Lil Yachty, he tried to help Trick, but he ended up going through a table, and Corbin used the distraction to his advantage, and yeah, he nailed the end of days to capture the title. And yeah, I mean, I like I said, I'm just surprised, and I'm surprised that Corbin won here because I figured Trick would retain, and it would kind of like be a like a kind of like a cheesy pinfall victory, like a roll up or something like that. But no, they straight up had Baron Corbin defeat Trick Williams to become the new United States champion, and I wonder where that's going to leave Trick, going forward. Yeah, because I figured they would give him a long run as the champion, and then they would use that to, transition him into the main event picture. But I don't know. Maybe Trick's gonna hang out in the mid card for a little while, and I'm sure they'll continue their feud. All right, up next we have the ladder match to declare the interim WWE Women's Champion. We had Charlotte Flair, Jade Cargill, the United States Champion Tiffany Stratton, Chelsea Green, and Lash Legend. And I called it right, didn't I, guys? Everybody was saying, like, oh, Charlotte's going to win. No, Jade's going to win. I had some people saying Tiffany was going to win. But no, I said it was going to be Chelsea Green who was going to win here. And she did. And my reason being is because it didn't really matter who was going to win this ladder match, because when Rhea comes back, Rhea's just going to end up beating that person anyway. So I said, why not put it on Chelsea Green? And they did just that, So yeah, Chelsea Green is the interim WWE Women's Champion, and I know a lot of people are bitching, saying like, "Oh, this is bullshit. She's just the interim champion. She's not the official women's champion." Well, I'm here to tell you this. It now counts in the record books that Chelsea Green has a reign as the women's champion. So, it might have the interim thing attached to it, but she is the women's champion. It counts. Chelsea Green has reached the high point of her career, and I think it's awesome. Chelsea is a star. She's someone that works hard. She, makes the best of what she's given every single week. And it's awesome for her to get this moment. But yes, and I think it was kind of creative how they did the finish for this match, because, Chelsea, she was all alone in the ring. Everybody was down outside the ring after Tiffany crashed into everybody. So Chelsea's like, oh shit, this is my chance, So she grabbed the ladder, went up to the top, and then B-Fab and Mi Chin came out to help Jade. And then they pushed Chelsea off the ladder, but she was left hanging upside down by her feet on the runs of the ladder. So then all the women get back in the ring. Chelsea just hanging out like this, upside down. And, and then Tiffany and Lash take each other out. and then Charlotte and Jade took each other out. And then Chelsea comes to, pulls herself up, scales the ladder, and brings down the title. So yes, I thought it was a creative finish. Yeah, I thought it was a chaotic match. But yes, I definitely feel like they did the right thing here, giving Chelsea Green the win and the title. But like I said, it did not matter who won and who lost, because Rhea, when she returns, because Rhea is still technically the women's champion, but Chelsea is also considered the women's champion. Just the interim tag is attached to it, but it goes down in the history books as a legitimate reign for Chelsea Green. Because, basically they're taking a page out of the UFC's playbook. They're not stripping the title off of Rhea. Instead, they're letting her keep the title until she returns, and we just have an interim champion and Chelsea Green until Rhea comes back, and then they'll do a unification match to declare the official women's champion. But yes, I tip my hat off to WWE Creative, to Triple H for pulling the trigger on Chelsea Green. I definitely think it was the right call. And then, we'll have to see how it goes going forward. All right, up next, we have the Human Monies on a pole match. Danhausen versus Dominic Mysterio. And this match was exactly how, I thought it would be, and how everybody else probably thought it would be. Just a comic relief match. And that's exactly what it was. We had the mini Housens and Joe Hendry come out to basically neutralize JD McDonough. And then Danhausen caused the turnbuckle pyro to go off, which, took care of Dominic. And then Danhausen was able to retrieve the $100,000 and give him the win in the Human Monies on a pole match. So yeah, Danhausen gets a big win here at SummerSlam. I thought they would have Dom go over, but Danhausen, he's just really over right now. He's super popular with the WWE fans, and they just want to keep Danhausen going in the right direction. And I feel like that's what WWE is doing. Danhausen, he's hilarious, funny, and he's super over right now. So yeah, I can see why Danhausen went over, and we'll have to see what Dominic does on the fallout, if they keep it going, if they continue to feud, or if Danhausen moves on to cursing somebody else. All right, up next for the Intercontinental Championship, Chad Gable versus Penta. Penta defending the title. Chad Gable was in his hometown of Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I thought this was a really good match. Pretty good technical match here between the two of them. And good storytelling as well. Penta worked on Chad Gable's shoulder, and, Chad looked like, he was pretty banged up, and he was selling it really well. And Penta was looking at Chad saying like, "Oh, I'm sorry," like he had some guilt over, that he was causing Chad the pain that he was causing him, because these two have developed a mass amount of respect for each other in the last several weeks. And, since Chad's been, since he was unmasked as El Grande Americano, and he's back to being just Chad Gable, he's been apologizing and showing respect to all luchadors. And yeah, so Penta, he was kind of conflicted, wanting to remain champion, but also didn't want to cause serious injury to Chad Gable. But Gable, he came back, and he battled through the match, battled through the pain, and then he put Penta in the ankle lock and he cinched it in, which caused Penta to tap out. So your new WWE Intercontinental Champion, Chad Gable. Gable finally gets his first singles title win, and it's in front of his hometown crowd, and it's in front of his family. And I thought that was just, an awesome, cute moment there. Having his son in the ring, and his son is dressed just like his dad. That was just a great, wholesome moment there. You love to see it. And yeah, it was just awesome, having him there in front of his family, his wife, his kids, and his parents. Just awesome. I'm happy for Chad Gable. He deserves it. He's worked hard for this moment. And yes, he is now the new IC champion. And I couldn't think of anyone more deserving of a reign here than Chad Gable. All right, up next, we had the main event of night 2 for the World Heavyweight Championship. The OTC, Roman Reigns, defending against the visionary, the revolutionary, Seth freaking Rollins. Yes, this match, it hit all the notes. All of the story notes, for sure. And this match went over 30 minutes. Rollins had his face mask from when, they were in the Shield together, him and Roman. And then these guys were hitting each other with everything, stomps, spears, Superman punch, buckle bombs, you name it, they did it. And then in the end, the tribal chief overcame the visionary. Yes, Roman Reigns got the victory. He retains the World Heavyweight title, and it brings to a close a 12-year story between these two men. Because things changed drastically over a decade ago between these two men, when Seth Rollins made the decision to put that steel chair in the back of Roman Reigns and disintegrate the Shield. And, these two have had highs and lows throughout their careers, and it's now came to a close. Yeah, so it was definitely a storyline epic that we saw. These two told an amazing story in that ring. It's filled with emotion. And yes, we had a great match here between these two men. And honestly, at the end, when these two had that last Shield fist bump, yeah, that was definitely the proper way to end it. And it was so awesome to see. But yes, this will now bring their epic to a close. And yes, I think this was the perfect way to end this story. So now we'll have to see what happens post SummerSlam for Roman and for Seth, as they move on to probably, new competitors to feud with, or maybe Seth will be taking time off here after SummerSlam. That's all possible. But yes, so now the Shield storyline has finally concluded. All right, guys, that's my review of WWE SummerSlam. Let me know what you thought in the comments. Did you agree with what WWE booked? Did you not agree? Did you feel like there was some title changes that shouldn't have happened? Let me know. I love to hear your thoughts and opinions. And I will talk to you all in the next episode of Pro Wrestling Focus. And remember, watch wrestling and stay focused.